Have you ever trusted someone with everything you had only to have them stab you in the back? Felt that sting of betrayal so sharp it left you questioning your own judgment? Imagine forgiving them, thinking it will heal the wound, and then watching them do it all over again. It's a trap. And it's a trap that most people fall into over and over because they don't understand one simple truth. Some people are not meant to be forgiven. I'm not talking about mistakes, misunderstandings, or moments of weakness. I'm talking about the people who deep down thrive on your pain. The ones who will test your trust, manipulate your emotions, lie without conscience, exploit your kindness, and drain every ounce of your energy, and then smile while they do it. Forgiving them doesn't free you. It chains you to a cycle that will break you if you let it. You might be thinking, but forgiveness is noble. Forgiveness is strength. Yes, when it's genuine, when it's deserved, when it comes from someone who truly repents. But there's a dangerous misconception that forgiveness is always the answer. It is not. Some people are dangerous to your peace, your growth, your life itself, and every time you forgive them, you invite them back to hurt you again. Tonight I'm going to show you who those people are, why forgiving them is the greatest mistake you can make, and how to protect yourself from falling into their trap. By the end of this, you'll see the people in your life with a clarity you've never had before, and you'll understand why saying never again is not just a choice. It's a survival tactic. You've trusted people before. You've opened your heart, shared your secrets, given your loyalty, and put your faith in someone who promised they would never hurt you. And then, without warning, they did. They shattered that trust like it was nothing, leaving you questioning not just them but yourself. The betrayer is one of the most dangerous people you can allow in your life, because they know exactly how to exploit what makes you human, your capacity to trust, your hope for loyalty, your belief that people can change. At first they may apologize. They may cry, they may make excuses, they may promise it will never happen again. And if you're anything like most people, you want to believe them. You want to think, maybe this time is different. But here's the harsh truth. Betrayal is not a one-time accident for them. For the betrayer, it's a pattern. It's a choice they make over and over, and they have no intention of stopping because nothing compels them to. The moment you forgive them, the cycle begins anew. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone betrayed once and then again? Maybe it was a friend who shared your secrets behind your back. Maybe it was a business partner who cut corners, lied about numbers, or took credit for your work. Maybe it was a lover who promised faithfulness but gave you lies. Every time it happens, the first instinct is to forgive, to rationalize, to soften the pain by telling yourself this person isn't bad, they just made a mistake. But what you're doing is giving them permission to hurt you again. The betrayer relies on your mercy. They rely on your empathy. They know that guilt and shame will never stop you from believing in the goodness of people, and as long as you keep believing, they keep taking. They don't feel remorse the way you think they do. They calculate, they plan, they wait. Because to them, betrayal is not a sin. It's a tool. It's a way to gain power, to feel control, to assert dominance over the very people who trust them. You have to understand this. Forgiving the betrayer is not an act of strength. It's an act of vulnerability, an invitation to repeat the same pain. Every time you forgive them without seeing real change, you're teaching them that your boundaries are weak, your trust is exploitable, and your heart is a playground for their schemes. The more you forgive, the more emboldened they become. They don't just walk away from betrayal. They walk back into your life smiling, knowing you will let them. And here's what makes it even more dangerous. The betrayer can be charming. They can be convincing. They can make you believe they've changed. They can manipulate your emotions until you question reality itself. You might even catch yourself thinking, maybe this time it's different. Maybe they really do care now. But you know the truth deep down. You know that true change is shown through consistent actions, not sweet words or tearful apologies. And if the pattern is already set, if the behavior has repeated itself once or twice or more, history is on your side. Forgiving them again will only lead to another wound. It's not enough to just recognize the betrayer. You have to act. You have to establish boundaries so strong that even their charm cannot penetrate them. You have to stop giving them access to clearly. And for the first time, the betrayer has no control over you. Some people live in the shadows of other people's minds. They are the ones who can twist your thoughts, warp your perception, and make you doubt the very reality you see. They are the manipulators, the masters of control. And the danger of a manipulator is far greater than a simple betrayal, because while a betrayer hurts you directly, a manipulator makes you complicit in your own pain. They are subtle, calculating, and patient, and forgiving them is the quickest way to hand them the keys to your life once again. Manipulators thrive on emotions. Fear, guilt, shame, hope, love. They read these like a map, and they navigate your mind with precision. They know exactly which buttons to push to make you feel responsible for their mistakes, to make you apologize for their wrongs, to make you question your worth. They are not impulsive, they are strategic. They will build trust slowly, inch by inch, so that when the moment comes, they can twist it into leverage. And every time you forgive them, you reinforce the pattern. You are teaching them that manipulation works, and they will use it again. Think about the times you've known someone who always seemed to bend situations to their favor. Maybe it was a coworker who always made you feel guilty for taking credit for your own work. Maybe it was a friend who twisted your words to make you seem selfish or uncaring. Maybe it was a partner who turned your compassion into a weapon against you. In each case, there is a subtle, almost invisible thread they pull to keep you off balance, to keep you questioning, to keep you under their control. And the moment you forgive them without boundaries, they tighten that thread, pulling harder, testing the limits of how far they can go. The terrifying thing about manipulators is that they rarely look like villains. They can charm, they can be persuasive, they can make you feel like the problem lies with you. And that is exactly why forgiving them is dangerous. You see, the moment you excuse their behavior, you give them permission to continue. They don't just test limits once, they test them endlessly. Each apology they offer, each promise to never do it again, is just another step in the dance of control. They know forgiveness is your weakness, and they will exploit it until it no longer exists. Manipulation is not always obvious. It can be quiet, it can be subtle, it can appear as concern, advice, or guidance. They speak in a language that makes you doubt yourself. They twist your sense of morality so that you question whether your anger is justified, whether your boundaries are too strict, whether you are overreacting. And when you forgive them without seeing true, consistent change, you are handing them a mirror to reflect your insecurities back at you, using your own mind against you. You must understand, manipulators are relentless. They do not change unless they choose to, and their choice is rarely motivated by conscience. It is motivated by control. They thrive in chaos and confusion because that is where they shine. And the only way to break their grip is to see the pattern, recognize it for what it is, and refuse to participate. Forgiving them too soon does not heal your relationship. It strengthens their hold. It trains them to continue using the same tactics, and every time you fall for it, the cycle repeats. The pain manipulators inflict is not always immediate. Sometimes it is emotional, sometimes psychological, sometimes professional or financial. But make no mistake, it is real and it is corrosive. They chip away at your confidence, your sense of reality, and your peace of mind. They make you question your judgments, your memories, your feelings, and every time you forgive them without change, you are inviting that corrosion to continue. You are telling them that your forgiveness is a tool they can wield against you again. But here is the empowering truth. Once you see a manipulator for who they are, you take away their power. Recognition is the first step toward liberation. When you identify the patterns, the guilt trips, the twisting of words, the subtle digs, the attempts to control your choices, you arm yourself with clarity, and clarity is the greatest weapon against them. Forgiveness in this context is not strength, it is surrender. Strength is seeing the manipulation and saying, "Not this time." Strength is enforcing boundaries, walking away when necessary, and refusing to give them the control they crave. Manipulators rely on your willingness to accommodate, to excuse, to rationalize. They rely on your hope that people can change overnight. And when that hope meets your forgiveness, they are emboldened. Every story you've heard about someone being played by a master manipulator is a story of repeated forgiveness. And every time the pattern repeats until the victim finally awakens to the truth, some people cannot be reasoned with. Some people cannot be forgiven because forgiveness gives them the exact tool they need to hurt you again. You must decide whose voice matters in your life, the manipulator's or your own. You must decide whether their subtle games will dictate your emotions or whether you will dictate your own peace. The moment you forgive without action, you allow them to rewrite your reality. The moment you forgive without boundaries, You hand them your life. And the moment you recognize them, refuse their control, and reclaim your power, you break the cycle once and for all. Manipulators will always try to draw you back. They will charm, they will apologize, they will offer explanations, they will present a version of themselves that looks like change, that looks like remorse, that looks like love, and you must remember, true change is measured in action, not words. Forgiveness without change is weakness. Forgiveness without boundaries is surrender, and surrender to a manipulator is a trap that will never release you. The most courageous act is to refuse, to see the manipulation, understand the stakes, and protect yourself. The most powerful people are not those who forgive indiscriminately, they are those who recognize deception, face it with clarity, and choose themselves over the chaos others try to impose. When you refuse to forgive manipulators without accountability, you stop giving them power over your mind. You stop letting them shape your reality. You stop letting them win. There is a special kind of pain that comes from trusting someone, only to realize that their words are meaningless. The chronic liar is not someone who slips up once or twice. They are not people who make a small mistake and apologize. They are people who make deception a lifestyle, a habit, a tool to bend the world to their will. They lie not out of necessity, but out of choice. And forgiving them is a dangerous mistake, because every time you forgive a chronic liar, you teach them that the consequences of deception are negligible, that their lies are inconsequential, and that they can continue without fear of accountability. Think about the damage a chronic liar can do. Lies are not just words, they are weapons. They distort reality, they undermine trust, and they corrode relationships. At first it might seem small, a fib to cover a minor misstep, an exaggeration to impress, a lie to avoid conflict. But then it grows. Lies pile upon lies like building blocks, forming a structure so complex that no one can navigate it. And the moment you forgive them without real proof of change, you are giving them permission to construct even taller towers of deception. You are telling them, whether intentionally or not, that their actions have no weight, that your trust is flexible, that truth is negotiable. Chronic liars are predators of perception. They feed on belief. They rely on the fact that humans are naturally inclined to see the best in others. They know that you want to believe people, that you want to trust, that you want to find honesty in the world, and they exploit it. They tell the stories you want to hear. They play the roles you expect. They present themselves as friends, partners, colleague. Willingness to forgive. They know that eventually your desire to maintain peace will outweigh your desire for honesty. And they are right until you make the conscious decision to break the cycle. Breaking the cycle requires clarity and courage. You must recognize the patterns. You must see the repeated lies for what they are. You must stop justifying their behavior, stop hoping they will change overnight, and stop forgiving without accountability. Forgiveness in this context is not noble, it is dangerous. It is a form of complicity that strengthens their power, feeds their deception, and leaves you vulnerable to further harm. The chronic liar thrives in relationships built on trust and hope because they know that people naturally want to forgive. They know that humans tend to give second chances, and they exploit this tendency ruthlessly. Every story you've heard of someone being deceived repeatedly is a story of forgiveness misplaced, of boundaries ignored, of lessons unlearned. And every story has the same ending: repeated pain, eroded confidence, and a hard-earned realization that some people cannot be trusted. You must understand something fundamental. Lies have consequences. Not for the liar, perhaps, but for the one who continues to forgive them without boundaries. Each act of forgiveness is a bridge they can cross to continue their deception. Each act of leniency is a green light for the next lie. And eventually, the weight of repeated deception crushes more than just trust. It crushes your sense of reality, your sense of safety, and your ability to rely on your own judgment. The only way to protect yourself is to stop giving them the power to deceive you. Hold them accountable. Demand honesty. And if they cannot meet that standard, if the pattern continues, do not forgive, do not excuse, do not rationalize. Remove them from your life, because true change cannot be forced, it must be chosen. And when someone chooses to lie repeatedly, that choice defines them, not you. By refusing to forgive chronic liars without genuine change, you reclaim control. You stop letting them dictate your perception. You stop allowing them to manipulate reality. You protect your mind, your trust, and your peace. Forgiveness, in the absence of accountability, is a tool for the liar, not for you. Strength is not in forgiving blindly. It is in seeing clearly, acting decisively, and never allowing deceit to repeat unchecked. The chronic liar will always try to charm, excuse, or manipulate you into forgiving. They will plead, rationalize, and spin stories that make you question your own judgment. And that is why vigilance is necessary. Forgiveness without proof of change is weakness. Boundaries are strength. Clarity is power. And choosing yourself over repeated deception is not just an act of self-respect, it is a form of survival. Some people enter your life not to build, not to nurture, not to grow alongside you, but to take. They are the opportunists, and they have a singular skill. They see weakness, vulnerability, or generosity, and they exploit it. They measure every kindness, every gesture, every ounce of trust, not to reciprocate, but to calculate what they can gain. Forgiving them is not just a mistake, it is handing them permission to strike again, to take more than they ever should, and to leave you depleted while they thrive. Opportunists are Redditors dressed as allies. They can be charming, persuasive, or even convincing in their apparent concern. At first, you might not even realize what's happening. They show up when they need something: advice, money, connections, time, favors. They are always present when there is an opportunity to benefit themselves, but conspicuously absent when it comes to supporting you. They are masters of timing, always showing their face when it suits them, disappearing when it doesn't. And every time you forgive them for exploiting you, you teach them that this pattern works, that your generosity has no limits, and that your patience is infinite. Think about the moments in your life when someone took more than you were willing to give, yet you rationalized it, excused it, or forgave them. Maybe it was a coworker who claimed credit for your work. Maybe it was a friend who borrowed endlessly without returning anything. Maybe it was someone close who took advantage of your kindness in ways so subtle you only realize later. Each act of forgiveness is a step deeper into their grasp, a reinforcement that you are someone to be exploited again. Opportunists are not lazy or incompetent, they are strategic. They are keen observers, watching carefully, learning what you value, and identifying exactly how to benefit at your expense. They do not need to be overtly malicious. Subtlety is their strength. They thrive in relationships built on trust, generosity, and goodwill because they know exactly how to manipulate those qualities to their advantage. Every time you forgive them, they become bolder, more confident, and more relentless. The cycle continues until you finally recognize the truth. Some people are not in your life to give, they are in it to take. Forgiveness, when given without awareness, is the very fuel opportunists need. It is what allows them to escalate their exploitation. It sends a clear message: you can take more from me, and I will still let it slide. And make no mistake, opportunists are not motivated by guilt, remorse, or morality. They are motivated by opportunity, by gain, by the thrill of benefiting without consequence. They are calculating, they are patient, and they will strike again as soon as the next opportunity presents itself. The danger of the opportunist is also emotional and psychological. When you are exploited repeatedly, you begin to question your judgment. You start doubting your instincts, wondering if you are too generous, too trusting, too kind. They don't just take things, they take your confidence, your sense of fairness, and your belief in the value of reciprocity. And the more forgiving you are, the more they assume your willingness to tolerate their behavior, leaving you emotionally drained and uncertain of your boundaries. Opportunists are different from betrayers, liars, or manipulators. Their goal is not necessarily deception or emotional control. They simply seek to gain whatever they can, however they can, whenever they can. Their strategy is rooted in observation, calculation, and exploitation. And while they might not lie, manipulate, or betray directly, they prey on your goodwill, your generosity, and your trust, taking advantage of what you offer freely. Forgiving them without addressing the pattern is the same as giving them a roadmap to repeat their actions indefinitely. To break free from an opportunist, you must develop awareness and boundaries. You must recognize the pattern, the repeated borrowing, the taking without giving, the one-sided effort, the constant request for favors without reciprocity. Awareness alone is not enough. You must act. Forgiveness without action is permission, and permission is what keeps the cycle alive. Protect your resources. time, energy, trust, and attention, and do not allow anyone to exploit them repeatedly. The moment you see the opportunist clearly, you regain control. You begin to understand that saying no is not cruelty, that refusing to forgive without accountability is not vengeance, it is self-preservation. You see that your life is not a buffet for others to take from at will. Strength lies in refusal, in recognition, and in the courage to protect yourself from those who would exploit your kindness. Forgiveness given to an opportunist is weakness, vigilance and boundaries are power. Opportunists will always test your limits. They will try to charm, manipulate, and persuade you into giving again. They will remind you of old favors, appeal to guilt, or pretend that nothing has changed. And that is why clarity is essential. Forgiveness cannot be unconditional when the person in front of you has a pattern of taking advantage. Every act of leniency is an invitation to repeat behavior. Every excuse you make is a roadmap for future exploitation. And every time you forgive them without consequences, you strengthen their grip. The most powerful people are not those who give endlessly. They are those who recognize exploitation, see the pattern, and act decisively. They understand that generosity is a gift to those who respect it, not a weapon for those who exploit it. By refusing to forgive opportunists without accountability, you reclaim your life, your resources, and your peace. You choose yourself over their gain. You refuse to be used. And in doing so, you demonstrate a clarity and strength that no opportunist can overcome. There are people in life who thrive on negativity, who feed on chaos, who find energy not in building themselves or others, but in draining what is good around them. They are the toxic influencers, and they are far more dangerous than betrayal, lies, or exploitation. At first, they may seem exciting, charismatic, or compelling. They draw people in with charm, humor, or influence. But over time, their presence erodes your energy, your confidence, and your ability to grow. Forgiving them, or allowing them to persist in your life, is not kindness. It is a slow surrender of your own potential. Toxic influencers operate in subtle ways. They twist positivity into negativity, encouragement into criticism, opportunities into manipulation. They rarely admit fault, rarely take responsibility, and rarely evolve. They do not grow because growth requires effort, reflection, and accountability, qualities they avoid at all costs. Instead, they feed off stagnation, conflict, and drama. And every time you forgive them, every time you excuse their patterns, you water the weeds of their toxicity, letting them continue to strangle your personal and emotional space. Consider the impact they have on your life. You might leave an encounter feeling drained, anxious, or second-guessing yourself. Their words and actions stick with you long after the interaction ends, because their energy is like a magnet. Tick force, pulling you toward doubt, fear, or resentment. They do not inspire growth. They demand attention, manipulate your emotions, and test your patience. And when you forgive their repeated negativity or destructive influence, you are reinforcing the behavior, giving them more room to invade your mental space and telling them without words that it is acceptable to continue. Toxic influencers are not always overtly cruel. Sometimes they are disguised as friends, mentors, or even loved ones. They may offer advice, critiques, or guidance, but always in a way that diminishes your confidence, fosters dependency, or drains your energy. They create cycles of emotional highs and lows, keeping you tethered to their influence. And just like a storm that seems temporary but leaves devastation behind, their presence can have long-lasting effects if you allow forgiveness or tolerance to extend to repeated offenses. Forgiving a toxic influencer is particularly dangerous because their harm is not always measurable, unlike a betrayer who steals something tangible or a liar whose deception is concrete. The toxic influencer attacks your inner world. They undermine your clarity, make you question your decisions, and sap the motivation needed to pursue your goals. You may rationalize their behavior, tell yourself that everyone has flaws, or assume that they will change, but their patterns rarely shift. They do not grow because growth requires accountability, and accountability is the one thing they refuse to embrace. You might think that distancing yourself from them is harsh or unforgiving, but in reality, the refusal to forgive without change is a form of survival. It is a recognition that your energy, time, and focus are too valuable to squander on someone unwilling to evolve. Toxic influencers thrive because they exploit forgiveness and tolerance. They rely on the human tendency to excuse bad behavior, to hope for improvement, and to forgive repeatedly in the name of connection. And every time you forgive them without seeing real growth, you become a participant in their cycle of stagnation. The effects of keeping toxic influencers in your life are cumulative. Each interaction, each conversation, each compromise chips away at your clarity, your ambition, and your mental well-being. Over time, their influence can feel so pervasive that you forget what it is like to operate without their shadow looming over your choices. And that is exactly what they want. They do not want to see you succeed on your terms because their success is defined by the chaos or dependence they cultivate in others. Forgiving them allows this dynamic to persist, giving them unchecked access to your life, your decisions, and your peace. Breaking free requires awareness, courage, and consistency. You must recognize the signs: repeated negativity, lack of growth, energy-draining behavior, constant need for validation at your expense. You must see that their presence is not a gift, not mentorship, not friendship. It is a weight, and you must act, not with malice but with intention. Forgiveness alone is powerless unless it is paired with boundaries, accountability, and, in many cases, removal from your inner circle. Protecting your energy is not cruelty, it is preservation of your potential. The power of refusal is transformative. When you stop forgiving a toxic influencer for their repeated patterns, you reclaim authority over your life. You begin to set standards for who can occupy your mental and emotional space. You begin to understand that your energy is finite and that not everyone deserves access to it, and in doing so, you open room for growth, positivity, and relationships that elevate rather than drain. Forgiveness without accountability in the presence of toxicity is not a virtue, it is surrender. Recognition and decisive action are strength. Toxic influencers will test your limits. They will attempt charm, manipulation, guilt-tripping, or intimidation to pull you back into their orbit. They will try to convince you that forgiveness is your duty, that patience must be extended, that enduring their patterns is noble, and every time you relent, you reinforce the cycle. Every time you forgive without boundaries, you allow them to continue siphoning your energy. But every time you refuse, every time you establish limits, every time you step back to preserve your peace, you reclaim your power. The most powerful people in the world understand the value of their energy. They do not give it away freely to those unwilling to grow. They do not allow toxic patterns to dictate their decisions. They recognize the subtle ways in which energy can be drained and act decisively to protect themselves. By refusing to forgive toxic influencers without change, you declare that your life, your growth, and your peace are not negotiable. You choose yourself over stagnation. You choose progress over chaos. You choose strength over surrender. You've listened closely. You felt the weight of each warning, the sting of every truth. The betrayer, the manipulator, the chronic liar, the opportunist, the toxic influencer, they are not abstract ideas. They are real people, and they may already be in your life, testing your limits, probing your boundaries, and waiting for the moment you forgive too easily. Forgiveness is not weakness, but in the wrong hands, it becomes your undoing. Every time you forgive without discernment, you invite pain, deception, and exploitation back into your world. Every time you excuse, rationalize, or hope for change without evidence, you risk being hurt again. The lesson is simple, but it is brutal. Not everyone deserves your forgiveness, and not everyone deserves access to your life. Loyalty must be earned. Trust must be proven. Energy must be respected. People who repeatedly betray, manipulate, lie, exploit, or drain you do not change because of your forgiveness. They change only when they are willing to take responsibility for their actions. And if they are unwilling, you owe it to yourself to protect your peace, your clarity, and your growth. Survival is not about vengeance. Survival is about wisdom. Survival is about recognizing patterns, refusing to be complicit in your own suffering, and taking the decisive actions that safeguard your mind, your heart, and your life. To forgive blindly is to give away your power. To let people hurt you again is to surrender your future. But to stand firm, to say never again, to create boundaries so strong that no one can cross them without consequence, that is strength. That is freedom. That is mastery of your own life. Remember this: the people who have hurt you before will always test you again if you let them. But the moment you refuse to forgive recklessly, the moment you reclaim control, the moment you prioritize your own well-being above their patterns, you change the rules. You are no longer a target. You are no longer a pawn. You are the one who decides who enters your life, who stays and who leaves. You are the master of your trust, the guardian of your energy, and the protector of your peace. So take this lesson with you. Never forgive recklessly. Never let history repeat itself at your expense. Never allow people who have proven themselves dangerous, manipulative, deceitful, exploitative, or toxic to hurt you again. Protect yourself, honor your boundaries, and choose your people wisely. Because forgiveness is powerful, but only when it is earned, and your life, your peace, and your growth are worth far more than anyone else's temporary comfort or deceit. Stand firm, stand clear, and never forget the people who deserve forgiveness are few, but the people who do not must never cross your path again.